up from the dust of Alabama to an ambassador of the Lord Jesus Christ. That's my life story. I was born in Greensboro, Alabama. My parents moved to Tuscaloosa, where the University of Alabama is. And it was more city life there. I used to go with my grandfather, who was a minister, to church with him, and I'd go to visit him all the time because he would let me drink coffee, and my mom didn't want me to do it. And so I got very interested in church going from him. We lived on a street that wasn't paved. I lived with my mom and my dad. We had an outhouse, no running water inside, a stove that you had to put wood and coal in to cook and whatever. As I grew older, I realized it was a disadvantage. I had a cousin who lived close by and like 2 houses removed on that same street, but she was like the rich one of the family. She had a car and a baby grand piano in her house, and she had a store, a restaurant, which was where I got my first job. I couldn't reach the cash register, so I used to stand on a wooden soda crate, and to reach the cash, I could count, but I couldn't reach the cash register to make change. And she was very good to our family. I had, it was a strange upbringing. My father was a good father, but he loved to gamble. And many times he would gamble away the money. And my mom, who was a practicing dietitian, she would work in wealthy family homes. And finally she got a job at the University of Alabama, that's why I brought that up, as a house mother at one of the fraternity houses. I can remember when I was 5, one of the frat brothers asked my mom, because she used to bring me to work with her, if he could take me to a football game. And she said yes. And I remember this story because people wonder how I ever got to be so patriotic. Sitting in the stands, the minute they started the Star-Spangled Banner, I jumped up and saluted and put my hands over my heart and repeated the national anthem with them and sang and gave the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag at 5 years old. So when he brought me back to the house and told my mom, he said, "Maggie, I want to tell you," my mom's name was Margaret, we called her Maggie, "I want to tell you, you got a little patriot on your hands." Said she was the first one that stood up when the national anthem was being played or the Pledge of Allegiance. And she knew how to do it. So that was exciting for me. But the fact that my mom had to work and carry out things that my father wasn't supplying, yet he was there all the time with me. I had good remembrance of my father. My father drove the truck for it to deliver food to different areas. And when he would finish his deliveries, if anything was left on the truck, he could bring it home or whatever, but I was an only child. So he would always take me to go with him to a family that lived out on the Black Warrior River that had 18 children. and he would give the food to them. And because he knew they had it, because they lived there and they fished and did things to help feed the family. When I was going to go to the kindergarten, and my mom just thought that was just too far for me to walk, she asked my grandfather if it was okay if I went to the Catholic school, which was only 3 blocks away. And he said yes. And so I could walk to school every day, and that's where I had my education. I fell in love with Jesus then. I believe I had a guardian angel from that time. I used to go to Mass on Sunday and then go to Sunday school to the Baptist church. We were missionary Baptists. We would go home for dinner, and I would come back for the Vespers at the Catholic Church, and then go to BYPU youth group, and then for the evening service. So I was knee-deep into the church. I was very active in anything that I did. I believed in doing a good job of everything. Walking home from school one day, there was a lady who had a beauty shop. As I walked past like a line of stores, and she came out and she stopped me and spoke and asked me where was I going. She said, "You're a nice little lady, little girl. I see you every day. You think you would like to have a job?" And I said, "Well, I help my cousin. You know, you would have to ask my mother." So she said, "Could you get your mother to come here to come?" Because she wasn't going down a paved street where we lived. So I brought my mom back, and she said, "Well, what would she be doing?" She said, "Oh, she'd just be cleaning up, running the dust mop and emptying the trash can or something." I actually believe that she just wanted to help us. You know, she just wanted to be a blessing to me. And I have found that in my whole life, that there's been people of different races that have been instrumental in helping me get to where I've come today. So as I look back, I see, and that was the first time. My father left the South and moved north because he could get a better job. So he came to Philadelphia. And the reason that was significant for me was because one of the days while I was still in Alabama, in Tuscaloosa, there were a group of us playing outside of a Hills Brother or a grocery store. I can remember wearing a white dress and barefooted and all, because in Alabama you did that. And there was a man, I thought, appeared to us and asked us, "Where do you children live?" And everybody answered their address of where they lived in Tuscaloosa. But I said, "I live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania." And when I said that, I couldn't believe that it had come out of my mouth. So I ran home to tell my mom, because I had learned that lying I was not good at that. So I wanted her to know what had happened to me. That I told her, "Mom," I said, "that wasn't me, that wasn't my voice. I don't know where it came from. It was my voice, but I don't know where the words came from." So she said, "Don't worry about it." She says, "We'll just keep that in our hearts." So when my father moved to Philadelphia, we thought, "Oh, I'm going to get to live in Philadelphia." But he didn't like it. So he moved on from Philadelphia to Ohio. So by the time we came to North, we came up on the train to Youngstown, Ohio. And that's where I finished my schooling. And we lived in a room at first until we could get a house. And my mom started to work in her profession of working in very wealthy homes. And my father, he had a job as a plumber's helper. So he worked, but sometimes he didn't make it home with the money if he gambled it. So, but we never did without. We never really did without. I do remember in Alabama when he had a garden with string bean and lettuce and tomatoes and all kinds of things. And when we didn't have money, he would take the vegetables and we would trade them at the supermarket for meat or for other things that we needed. And they were glad to get the fresh grown vegetables. So he was always there for me, was always taking care of things that I needed to do if my mom was at work. So I did very well in school. When I came to Ohio, I was told by my cousins who I met in Ohio to say that they're going to put you back because you're from down south. And I said, fine. So I took the test, and they didn't because I had been well trained in St. Mary's Catholic School. So I was always on not on the honor roll, but the high honor roll, and all through school until things started to not go well with my mom and dad. And when I was in high school, I can remember in the 11th grade is when my teachers called me in and said, we want to talk to you because your grades are falling and there's something going on. And if you would like to talk to us about that, we'd be glad to help you, see if we could help you. And of course I denied it. I said, nothing is wrong. And they said, well, you may not want to talk about it. You may not want the help, but it's going to affect where you, the number that you're placed in graduation. And I said, it's okay. And so I got a job when I was in the 10th grade at Youngstown Sheeting Tube. And I worked in the evenings. I worked 40 hours a week. I worked more than my mom and earned more than my mom. I worked from 4 to 10, Monday through Thursday. On Fridays, they would let me off early to go because on Friday nights was when we had the football games and the dances and all kinds of things like that. So I didn't work Friday. Saturday, I worked 3 to 11. And because that way I could do my chores at home on Saturday mornings and go to work at 3 o'clock, and then I could go to the 11 o'clock movie at night. And so I didn't miss very much, but it was just moving. It had to be scheduled out. And I graduated from the Rayan School, which was a very fine school. And the reason I was able to go to that school because my mom worked for a very wealthy senator's home, worked in that home, and it was close to their house. And he got me into the school because I had the grades and everything else. So it was listed as one of the 10 best high schools in the country, along with Lower Merion here in Pennsylvania. I looked for a school. My father took me to Cleveland because I had saved enough money to pay for my whole nursing education. Things didn't cost as much back then. I had chose to go to Cleveland City Hospital for nursing. And my father helped me. We went to different schools till I picked out one. And then 2 weeks after I graduated from high school, I moved up to Cleveland because I thought if I could get a job there during the summer and I'll continue to work and I'll be ready for school in the fall. And well, those 2 weeks, my father moved out of my mom's house. And so they were separated. They were friends, but they separated. They just thought it would be better if they would separate. So I was in Cleveland, and it didn't bother me. And pretty soon I met somebody who, we were married in Cleveland. My daughter was born in Cleveland. And I went to Great Lakes College, a school of mechanotherapy, which is a school of physical therapy. And the reason I got there was because while I was in nursing training, there were two places that I didn't fit too well. And one was polio was very popular then at that time. And we had to spend 3 months at different places. So when I went to a school where they had polio patients, I didn't do very well there because there wasn't a lot that I could help them do. And I'm a person who liked to accomplish things. So that didn't go well. But when I got to OR and the nursing, the blood, it was just too much. So they called my mom and said I probably need to come home. And they talked to me about changing careers, and that's when I went into physical therapy. Well, soon after we were married in Cleveland, we were in the process of closing on the duplex. When my husband's father died, he went to sit in a chair and he just dropped dead. So the first time I'd ever been to Pennsylvania was when I came to his funeral. So we didn't close on the duplex, and we moved back to Philadelphia. That was 1952. I thought I was living in a factory because I never saw a row house before in my life, and I really didn't like Philadelphia, even though I got here because of the row houses. And I just thought I was going to suffocate because of claustrophobia, people living so close together. I kept my job at Youngstown Sheet and Tube, and I would fly back every weekend. So I did that for almost a half a year until my husband said, "This is not working." And when I come up to Cleveland again, we will be moving you back home to Philadelphia. And the hairdresser that I had says, "Mary, I think you can make it. We live here, and it's not so bad." So I settled in, but it was close. And when I came to Philadelphia, I looked for a job in physical therapy, and we were in the medical massage, and I got a job downtown Philadelphia, and we were in such a high skyscraper that I looked out the window and all I could see was tops of buildings and all, and I just said, "Lord, we can't do this. You got to find me another place in the suburbs somewhere." So sure enough, I got a job in Jenkintown doing that type of work. I worked on the main line a lot with patients. And I used to go to patients' homes to give them their treatments who didn't want to go to therapy at the hospitals and all. So I did that for many years. But I was in an accident, and from that time, that accident, I could no longer take my modalities and all that. So it was one of my patients who introduced me to a multi-level company. And my husband went with me to see the presentation. It was in Willow Grove. It was mostly cosmetics and vitamins and different things, which I was accustomed to because in physical therapy, we were probably the only people that were really taking vitamins. He said, is that all you have to do? And is introduce this to people and tell people about it? And he said, if that's true, if you want to do it, you go ahead. He said, because that's what you do all the time. You're always recommending something to somebody. And I said, well, I'll take it to my church. And if they like the products, then I'll be in. And that's what I did. And they loved it because you can see how I look. And I still use the product. I worked in doing the network marketing for 20-some years. I realized that one night when I was sick, on a Saturday night, and I had beauty advisors, and we would do shows in the homes like Tupperware. I had about 5 or 6 of them on a Saturday night doing a beauty show, and I was too sick at home that I couldn't even go out. And by the end of the night, when they gave me their totals, I could then understand network marketing, that it was many hands working and you're getting the percentage, and I was earning more than I could ever earn alone. So that's why I stayed in the business so long, and stayed in there until I was called to the radio. But that story began from listening to the radio and hearing a prayer meeting that was being held on a Wednesday night at the IHOP at Northeast Philadelphia, right by Sears, the Adams Avenue. And I thought, oh, that would be good. I was, by that time, an elder. I had been a trustee and an ordained deacon and an ordained elder in the Presbyterian Church. And, but the Lord was calling me to that prayer meeting. So even to the fact that I was on the phone with a pastor friend, and when I got some voices in my ear that said, I told you to go to this prayer meeting. I want you to just close that phone down and go right now. And I told the person who was on the phone that I had to leave. And he said, where are you going? And I said, I'm going to a prayer meeting. He said, pick me up. So I picked him up and we went to the prayer meeting at the bottom of the IHOP. So I started going there, and it wasn't long before the person who was running, because he wasn't even a pastor then, was running the prayer meeting, was looking down a list of people who were attending the prayer meeting, and he said he was looking for a certain name, and the Lord told him, he said, pick her. And he didn't really know me. He called me and talked to me and all that, he and his wife and all. And he said, would you meet us on Street Road at the diner? And I said, yes. And that's when he told me that he was going to get people to raise money to stay on the radio. It cost us $1,000 a week to be on the radio for an hour every Monday through Friday. And we did prayer. We had people could call in and pray, and he would pray with them on the phone. And I did that. I raised money. I did all kinds of things to sell ads, because he had an MBA from Villanova, so he was business conscious, and so was I. So I understand what he needed. And I said, I will do this for you if my business prospers. So I put ads on the radio and ran them for 2 or 3 days, and I was getting so many calls that I said, okay, I'll do it for you. And I had enough calls that for 6 months I didn't have to advertise anymore. So I went to different people and got ads to go on the radio. So much so that the Christian radio station would say to me when I would go there to take ads or do some work there, they would say, tell your boss that we're going to invite you to come and work for us. You're selling more than our salespeople. And I told him, he said, well, you tell them that I'll put them in a bodysuit if they don't leave you alone. But anyway, it worked out that I was working at that ministry as administrative assistant, because I found that the ministries were changing and the word of faith was coming along. And I was still at the Presbyterian Church, and I would go there Wednesday nights to the prayer. And I found that I could take something back, the Holy Spirit, in a different way to the Presbyterian Church, and take the administrative assistants, what they needed. He had absolutely no skills in that. So I did that for like 2.5 years, when one morning while I was in bed, I got a vision that came in front of my bed. It faced the north. And it was of Jesus saying, come, come. So on the radio, I had heard a broadcast that was coming out of Newark, New Jersey. And when he said, come, I said, we will go And on a Saturday, they had a church service in Brooklyn. And one of my spiritual daughters right now is, as a matter of fact, she's my youngest. She lives in Delaware. And she said, Mom, let's go, because I want to go to their school. They had a Christian school, a ministry school. So we went up there on a Saturday, and we got involved with that church when the Lord told me to leave the IHOP and then go up to Newark, New Jersey. And I said, surely I'm going to move up there. No, but I didn't move up there. I was up there 4.5 years after the riots had been in Newark. When you would get off the turnpike and you turn and you would see all the debris and the rubbish and everything that we were going to work on the streets there. And I was there 4.5 years, driving 4 times a week. I went to the school of ministry there. I had been offered by the Presbyterian Church to go to Princeton because I had a gift of healing. And for some reason, that didn't fit too well in the Presbyterian Church. So I was like a undercover agent. So I would go to the hospitals after everybody else had left and pray for people. Or I would pray for them, in their homes, or got so I could pray for them on the phone. So I told the Lord, I said, if this is not going to work in the religion that I'm in, then you need to give me another gift. It was at this banquet hall when we were there one Wednesday night that he anointed me to pray. I had been working the book table in the back, and women were not thought much of to pray or to preach or anything back then. This was in the early 80s, like 81 and 82. And I had become a widow in 81. And so I was free to go and do things. I had worked so hard after my husband died in the Presbyterian Church in the women's ministry that I had received an honor of being a Churchwoman of the Year and all that stuff. But in the meantime, when I went to help at this IHOP, we went to the banquet hall. And that particular night, the leader called me up to do the closing prayer, which was most unusual. And I did the closing prayer, and I had my eyes closed. And when I woke up, I saw all these people on the floor. They were everywhere. They were weeping, and I asked the Lord, I said, what is this? And he said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon you, and I've anointed you I said, to preach the gospel? He said, no, to pray. And I thought, oh, okay. So I went back to my place at the book table, and that's when I got a physical anointing on my body. I actually could feel it. And from that time on, I knew that I was being called to be a prayer warrior. And he had given me, we had been praying for Philadelphia, but then he gave me the mandate to cover Philadelphia with prayer. He called me after we left Newark, New Jersey. I was free. He said he was sending me home on the desert to rest from the 4.5 years, and he would tell me what church I could go to when that was over. But in the meantime, he gave me an assignment to go into the Redeemer's Church and intercede there, just intercede there for the whole summer, every Sunday. So I did that. And it was the church that I'm in right now. It was called Soul Searchers Evangelistic Church. And they put an ad on the radio, which I used to listen to the pastor on a Thursday night because he had a 15-minute broadcast. And I was a member of a club that was called Doer of the Word. And we were the Doer of the Words. We prayed all over Philadelphia. And with the woman who was head of that, Matha Wright. And I can remember that was the first award I got from anybody about prayer, was from Doer of the Word. We prayed. I got a job at Dunkin' Donuts. I was driving a big car at the time, a Fleetwood Brougham d'Elegance, and it used a lot of gas going up to Newark 4 times a week. So I told the Lord I needed a job. And I don't want to leave this out because as I was coming out of the post office one day, someone said, if you want a job, here's a flyer. I was telling a friend of mine what I was going to do to get a part-time job to pay the gas and tolls and everything I had to pay. So I took the flyer home, and I always prayed on my face. I was on my face when I was telling the Lord that he said, don't ask me for money. It's already down here, it's already down there. And if you want to, you go and get that job at Dunkin' Donuts. So I went in, put in an application, and they called me because all they had was like teenage girls and really young girls at that time, So anyhow, I went there, and I said, they really weren't really looking for me because I was in the high-end living of all these young girls. I came in with my $200 boots and my designer clothes and mink coat and jewelry, fine jewelry that I had been selling on the side. And the people looked at me and said, she doesn't need any job. But I did. And I took the job. They put me to work right there at the interview. And they wanted to try me out on a cash register and all that. Well, sales is my thing. So anyway, it went very well. So much so that they thought that I was only there 10 months. And I realized that he sent me into that Dunkin' Donuts to help bring out a girl who was on drugs. But when we would leave our prayer meetings on Wednesday nights, and I had to go to work at 10 o'clock, 10 to 6, because I had 3 days a week, 10 to 6. We would have a prayer meeting in the Dunkin' Donuts because the Lord had told me, behold your customers. And most of them were men that were coming in to get a sugar high. And this woman from Doer of the Word, Matha Wright, she would call the men over to the table, and we would talk to them and pray for them and lead them to the Lord. So we had that going on every Wednesday night at Dunkin' Donuts. So this girl that came to work there, she was on drugs, and I used to try to talk to her about, because she got thrown out of a home and all that, but she was in a shelter, and trying to lead her to the Lord and tell her not to take drugs and she could do something different. I was allowed to sell some of my natural products from Dunkin' Donuts. They had a camera, so they knew what I was doing. So I sold bee pollen over the counter to the people who would deliver the mail in the mornings, or the newspapers, or the nurses and doctors that worked at the hospital and all that. And I finally got this girl and got her into rehab. And when I left there, somebody drove a car into that Dunkin' Donuts. Well, they called me back and they said, things haven't been the same since you were here. He said they had thought that the girls were stealing because I would bring in more money than they did. And they came one night just to see, without me knowing, to see what I did. So as I drove in and went in the back, washed my hands and got it, and started waiting on customers, from the time I went in, I saw the manager and everybody sitting over there, and I said, I don't know why she's here, but anyway, I start waiting on the customers. So for 45 minutes before I got a break, and then I went over and I said, what are you doing here? She said, I was here to check on you. He said, because the other girls had told him, oh no, they know when her car comes in, they wait for her. We're not doing anything, but they would be on the phone. And when the customers came, it was interruption for them. But for me, I got a chance to serve them. It was altogether different mindsets. So anyway, I was bringing in anywhere from $50 to $200 more on my shift than they were. And I said, they're not stealing. But when the people would come through, I would offer them a buy. And the ones, especially the ones that came in the morning, they would want to buy a donut or two. And I said, we have a special on today. Why don't you buy a whole dozen donuts, take them into your job, have them at your desk. And I said, everybody will come past there. You'll be the hit of the office. So they would buy a dozen instead of 2 donuts. So next year I made more money. So, and they said, we could see, they said, we don't have to write any report. We saw for ourselves that, first of all, there was no business we were sitting here until you came in, and then they started coming in. So God, that kind of favor follows me usually whenever I walk in a store. It fills up. We have noticed that, whether it's a post office or meat market or whatever, till people have asked me, said, would you come down to my store every day? Because I've noticed, they had noticed, I had noticed it. And then my daughter and I started paying attention to it. But how I got to the radio station, it was one Sunday morning in Newark, New Jersey. We were all praising the Lord. And it was the Pentecostal Holiness Church that believed in all the gifts and everything else. They had a television program on, which I was on, had been on television. I was on television for 2 years with them and all that. When we were doing praise and worship and everybody had their hand raised because they did that, I heard this voice said, go tomorrow, Monday, and get your job at the radio station. And I opened my eyes and everybody was still praising the Lord. And I said, God, I know the voice, but it doesn't sound like you. You usually call people off of a job, and you're calling me to get a job. So I went. I was obedient, and I did exactly what he said. Now, they had tried to hire me before, and I said no, and they had offered me a salary and all that kind of stuff, and I said, no, the Lord hasn't called me to a job. I never wanted a job, and that's why I was in business for myself. When the manager saw that letter, she was surprised, so she called me. She said, is this real? I said, yeah. She said, Mary, why? Tell me the story. So I did. When I went to work there, they called me back from the Dunkin' Donuts, said, would you come and stay with us a day and train our people? And he says, I'll pay you the whole week's salary to let them know exactly what you do and how you do it and all that. So that went over well. During the time I was there, that's when the Lord called me to the National Day of Prayer. I was getting down to prayer one morning at 4 o'clock, which was a time that he had chosen for me many years before. As I was getting on my knees, I had the radio on. He told me, he said, turn the radio on. And I said, but I'm getting ready to talk to you. And he said, that's okay, I want you to hear something. And the radio came on, and Mrs. Shirley Dobson, who was president of the National Day of Prayer then, was on the radio telling people what it was, the National Day of Prayer, and asking people for coordinators in their areas, because it wasn't that well known all over. I had never heard of the National Day of Prayer Task Force. So anyway, he said, write this number down, and I want you to do something about this in Philadelphia. And I said, okay. So I figured I would call up and join a committee or whatever and see what I could do and all that. But I didn't do it. I didn't do anything about it. 2 or 3 days passed, and finally one day I felt this tug on my coattail, just like this, and said, I told you to do something about it in Philadelphia. So then I called the national office, and I was telling them that story of what had happened and how I had got their number. And they started laughing like it was something. And I said, what's so funny? And they said, the story you told me sounds like he has picked you for that area. Because I want to tell you. I said, what? He said, we really have nobody there. She said, we're going to invite you to come. We're having our annual summit, which they have gone for the last 34 years. They have the annual summit, and it's in Colorado Springs. And I said, well, you can invite me, but I know I can't come. I said, oh, I'm a homemaker. I'm a caregiver for my mom. I said, I'm in the school of ministry, and I work full time. And they said, fine. I'm telling the Lord this too, when he said he wanted me to do something about it. I had less than 14 days to go to the summit when my general manager came and said to me, oh, come in my office, I want to show you something. And she showed me these 4 checks. Usually I get 2 checks, my check and my commission. And she said, all of these are yours. And I said, what are they for? She said, well, we thought we'd make you Employee of the Year. And then there's another bonus amount of money there for you too. And I said, oh, that's wonderful. That's great. And, you know, I thanked her and all that, and went back to work. And the Lord called me and let me know about this trip to Colorado Springs. And I was telling her about it. I said, she said, oh, I can tell you all about out there, because you know our home office is in Denver. And I said, I can't go. You know, I take care of my mom, and I'm in the school, and da-da-da-da-da, and all of that. So I was telling my daughter about it. And she said, oh, Mom, I'll take care of Granny. And she says, I'll let you go to the summit. And I called up. Of course, I said I had about $1,500, and it cost me over $700 to get a ticket to Colorado Springs. And so it worked out that I went. And I couldn't get a ticket. I couldn't get a ticket back from Colorado Springs. I had to rent a car and drive to Denver to fly back to Philadelphia. Well, when I was in Colorado Springs that night, after the whole program was over, I walked to the back of the room, and I said, Lord, what am I here for? He just said, you'll find out. I said, okay. So they introduced me to the girl from Pennsylvania, Erie, and she told me, I'll introduce you to all the people, which she did. I thought, wow, there's nothing going on, and I'm going to start it, I'm going to do it, and yep. So anyway, on the way back from Colorado Springs, driving to Denver, I could see that they were having a football game, and there was no way that I was going to make it to the airport in time. So finally I got there, and I had missed my plane. I could see the plane going. I got rerouted. I called my boss and told her I wouldn't be in on Monday morning. I was going to have to come home that Monday. And she said, fine. So I called across the street to one of the motels to see if they had a room there. And of course, the jitney took me over. As this person who came to get me, to pick me up, to take me, he started to talk to me. And he said, can I speak to you? And I said, yes. He said, I'm having so much trouble. I want to go home. I said, what do you want to go home for? Aren't you working? Don't you like your job? Or what? He said, no. He said, my wife's father just got murdered, and she's by herself, and I want to leave work and go to be with her. And they won't let me off. They said if I just drop the van and leave before they replace somebody, they would fire me. And I said, but did you ever think of that your wife might need some time to herself until you get off from work? You'll be getting off soon, right? Yeah. So anyway, I said, when you get me in the hotel room, when I get my room and get settled in the room, I said, I'll meet you out in the lobby and I'll pray with you. So that's what I did. but I believe that was a divine appointment, that I prayed with him and talked to him for an hour or so before he could get off to go to work to be with his wife in her situation. So when I got back to Philadelphia airport, I didn't even have time to go home. I got my car. I went straight to my class because I had taken my books and all. I'm in school now. So I went there, and I came back, and I said, there's something you're asking. I said, I don't know how to do it, but you do. For weeks, nothing was happening, and they weren't telling me how to do it and anything about it. They didn't have any plan like they do today. And so I would just go on and not do anything. So one day I was driving to my church in Camden at the time. I said, well, you haven't told me how to do it, and I'm a person who like to get things done. He said, well, it's not too far away. He said, remember, I created the world in 6 days? I said, then you're doing it, right? He said, yeah. I said, okay, then I'll wait for you. And he said, but you've been doing what you're supposed to be doing. And I said, what's that? He said, you've been praying for Philadelphia. That's the one thing they told me to. That whatever I was going to ask other people to do, I had to be doing myself so that I would know what I was going to ask them to help, to join me in doing. So on my face, I would be praying for Philadelphia, the different sections, the different parts and different parts. And in 1994, I came on in 1993 with the National Day of Prayer Task Force. 1994, he gave me a map of the city, a zip code map that didn't even have the 191s yet. They were 2641, 01 and whatever. And that came from the post office, out of their manual. And he told me, he said, I have plans for that and I want to use that. And every time I would go to use it, he said, no, it wasn't time. So it wasn't until 2006 that my girlfriend that I met at a prayer meeting, a 7 o'clock prayer meeting at the Manor Bible Institute, that called me and said she was having a healing and a prayer meeting, and she wanted me to be a part. So I had already made up my mind that when I picked up the phone, I was going to say, no, I'm too busy. I have too much to do. As I was going towards the phone, the Lord said, tell her yes, and tell her it would be called Prayer in the City. And I thought, I don't believe you. So anyway, I got a chance to tell her that. And sure enough, that was the first time, that was 2006, that I was able to get this prayer map out. It was at a prayer meeting on a Saturday when he had told me what to put on the back of the prayer map. Instructions on what we were doing. It was to stop the violence in the city. And he gave me the scripture, 2 Chronicles 7:14. But he said, since you're in sales, you're going to understand this. I'm going to lay this prayer down, this verse down, so you can understand it. If you understand it to the people like this, then maybe they will get on it. And it said, if my people who are called by my name would humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then so if they do this, then I would hear from heaven, forgive their sins and heal their land. But I laid it out like that so that people could see there was something that they had to do. It was, like in sales, if you buy this, it should do this for me. And that's how I laid it out, with a stop sign that said, stop the violence. And then he had told me what else to put on it, asked people if they lived in Philly, worked in Philly, played in Philly, or went to school in Philly or whatever, they could be a part and they could pray, fix up, paint up, and where they lived, worked, or played, and that they were asked to take this prayer and pray or lay their hand. When you laid your hand on the map, it covered the map of Philadelphia, and you could pray for it and decree and declare that Jesus Christ of Nazareth was the Lord over Philadelphia. Also, that they could take this map and they could reproduce it and give it to their family and their friends and all. And they were asked if they would join us in walking our block and praying for every house in the block. That as they did that, God would tell them what was going on in the block without having to know the person's name or what. But if somebody was sick in there, or somebody had died and they were bereaved, or school's children, or if they had financial troubles, whatever the problems were, they would be revealed to them as they walked and prayed. And that's what I got. I got instructions on how to do that. And if they would call my number, I would send it out. And in recent years, if they call my number, I mail it out to them, email it out to them so that they have that. So that map is still going on. Now, I've been at the station all during that time. I feel like the Lord did not give me that ministry until I had answered the call to go to work first. It was a test of my obedience. And I thought I was going to be like I had been at any other local missionary that I'd served at 2.5 years, 3 years, 4 years at the most. And when 6 years came, I said, Lord, what are you doing? And then it came on and on and on that here, after 38 years, I'm still working and still producing and have done very well there. Done well for the company and myself with all the awards and things that I won in the President's Clubs and different other things. One day when we were having a party, I don't know what kind it was, I forget, they insisted that I sit in a certain seat. And they always called on me to pray. And I said, oh, I don't want to sit here. This is your seat, telling my general manager. And he said, sit there today, Mary. I said, okay. I sat there, and I thought they were going to ask me to lead in prayer. Instead, they asked somebody else, and then they swung the surprise on me that they were naming the whole sales wings as a Mary B. Campbell sales wing. And that plaque is there on the wall. And I just cried because I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. But most of all, he has used me to help businesses and ministries grow. And that's why it gives me such pleasure to be there, that I'm not there just for money. So in the meantime, I make sure that I'm there to help them, to aid them, and to get them more focused on what they should be doing. Instead of, they have a vision, but it's like this. But the Lord will give them, a target, something to happen now and something later and something later. So that's what I do at the station, and it's a pleasure. A big part of my coming up in Alabama, everywhere you went, there was separate signs and, you're not allowed. And one of the things that really stuck with me, so that even when we walked on the sidewalk, if the white race was coming down, you had to get over. You had to get off the street on the sidewalk on the grass and let them pass. And to that extent, and let alone the separate and the separatism and when I did visit the schools as I got older in the South, I could see they were just terrible. The condition of them, the bathrooms, everything, nothing was kept. It was sad, really sad. And yet, I know that something that's meant for evil could be turned into good, that more of the people of our race in the South went to college because there were no jobs like waitresses and drivers or chauffeurs or different things like that, like you had up north. So most of them, they either were doing janitor jobs or maids in the homes, or they were either college graduates. So because of the racial thing, and that played in our behalf, we had so many people from the South that did go to college, and they went to the black schools. Even today, I experience racism. I don't try to hide it because I just pray for the people, because most of them don't even know that they're practicing it. It has been brought up. It's not born in anybody. I don't care if they're white or yellow or green or purple. It's taught, and I know that. But every job I ever had, there'd never been another black person. Thank goodness that I realized that I was a child of God, and He was going to keep me no matter what. He had kept me from so many things in Alabama. I've seen, even when I came to Philadelphia, everywhere I went, it was because of my color. And they would hear me talk on the phone because I never had a Southern accent or anything. And when I would get to the job sometime, they would say, "Oh, but you never said you were black." And I said, "Wait, you didn't ask." And I have faced that here. I do see change, and I had prayed to the Lord to see the manifestations of so many of my prayers that I prayed through around Philadelphia and for Philadelphia, for my people. But I believe, as He said in Revelation, that there's going to be every tribe and tongue and nation. All of us are going to be there. And I remember Martin Luther King's speech. I had been through all the stuff before he did the march, way before Rosa Parks was on the bus. In my day, we weren't allowed to ride the bus. That's why the 5 miles was such a problem for me to go to school. When they really shifted for me, when I realized that so many, like anybody else, had been doing things that were not pleasing to the Lord without you even knowing it. And when you really sell out to the Lord and you find out that tea leaf reading and the horoscope and different other things that you got into, I can remember things that I did. One of the things when I was a child in Alabama and living in that small house, my aunt came to live with us. And on my walk to school, she had bought insurance from a company where they paid, I think, weekly or monthly or whatever. She asked me to drop it off at the insurance company. Instead, I took the money and spent it with my friends, and we had a party. So when they called her and said, "Mamie, where's your money? You're always paying up, and you did this," and she asked me what happened, and so I remember I was never a good liar, so I told my mom, and I took the beating and all that, but because I was so industrious, I earned enough money to pay it back. She made me pay it back. And that's way back, the little things. But things in my life that I had been involved in that were not pleasing to the Lord. I can remember a reading in Ezekiel where He would turn my stony heart into flesh, crying one morning till my pillow was wet about all the things that I was repenting for and I was turning around from. I could see Him just making it possible in my life where I couldn't do it, but the Holy Spirit definitely had permission to do it because I was sold out. and I wanted to do it. I can remember my mom, when she was working in one of the senators' houses out on the main line, she called me one day. I was in the network marketing, and she said, I want you to turn on TV. It was about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon or something. And she said, just turn it on. I said, and I was just getting out the shower. All I had on was a towel. I turned it on, and she said, I want you to listen to this, and I want to make sure you hear it, and you let him make the altar call and make sure. She said, because I want to make sure that you're saved. And I just thought that was really something in my life. There I was with just this towel on my knees and accepting the Lord to just yield in my life to Him. I was already a widow then, and so I had seen so many things, because I had the privilege in my life as well of taking care of my mother-in-law with Alzheimer's, and then my mom with dementia. She was almost 98 when she died. I was a caregiver for them. I found that I knew how to take care of them because I knew the Lord was taking care of me, you know. And He would give me the strategy on everything. I go to Him every morning and ask Him, what are we doing today? And no matter what I have planned, if it's not His plan for me, I ask Him to please change it. And if I don't want to change it, I said, change my changer, because change my wanter. And He does. He let me know that extraordinary things can be accomplished by ordinary people when they get caught onto something bigger than them. And I believe we have taken on the city. And because all of us are coming together and working together, that we're going to accomplish it. And something that I have, which is, I call it stickability, perseverance. I'm not a person to give up. It's like I've been on my job all those years. Some people, they don't stay on a job 2 years. I've been in the different churches. The church I'm in now, I've been in over 30 years, which He called me to, that church too. I've been on my job all those years. I've been in the house that I live in now since 1959. I'm not a person to run from. If it needs repair, if it needs care, if we do that and we keep it in shape what God has given us, I believe in that. I believe that stickability is a word, that we don't run from it. So we're still going. In 2007, I was honored at our national headquarters for being National Coordinator of the Year, which meant that I was also honored at the White House with President Bush at the Cannon House. The Dobsons were there, and it was quite an honor, because there were a few people who had gotten that honor, and not many since. Different people took over, so they no longer have that award, but they have a different one. So that was a national award, which I had to get, my daughter couldn't even go because she had to take care of my mom while I got one of my friends, and one of my friends was able to go down with me to Washington for that celebration, and we were at the White House and the Cannon House. I've gotten so many local and national awards that I don't know where to put them. And one of my favorite ones is what Tabernacle David gave me. They gave me a painting. They have honored me in so many ways, and I have it in my prayer room, in my study, in the prayer room, where I'm in there praying. I believed in an altar because I have to lay things out and lay my hands on them and pray, sitting, standing, and doing all kinds of things. So I didn't have an altar, so I just made an ironing board. I took an ironing board to make my altar. I still use it. And that's how I pray for people. If I can get a picture of them so I can have it on a prayer board, so I can see them, and and lay hands on them and pray. I belong to a women's group called Women in Partnership with God. And that map that the Lord said he would have something more to do with that, he told me he wanted me to do the map, the back of the map in one page, but to put the whole 7 mountains on that one page. And for a coloring book saying, I love to pray. That's the Lord what he wanted to do with it. He said he wanted to get it out to daycare children to teach them how to pray. And I said, how am I going to do that? So one day I was riding along and I saw the image of Uncle Sam saying, I need you. And that's what I put on a card. I made it on a card and said, I need your help. I need you to pray. And it talked about what we wanted to do with the daycare children. So we were at the House of Prayer one Saturday when we typed up what to say on the letter and everything, and I got a letter. So when I shared it with my daughter, she said, Mom, I want to help you with that. That's going to be my project, because she's a crossing guard. We got these printed up by the 1,000. I think my first batch was like 2,000 of these. And she said, I'll take them to the daycares. And we prayed it smart from the beginning. We took these maps she took them to the daycare in her crossing guard uniforms. And they were so happy to see her when she came in, because they welcomed her because they knew she was a friend. She was a crossing guard, so she didn't even have to have an appointment. She just walked in. And she said, I'm here. And she said, what can we do for you? She said, we'd like to do something for you. And she would give them this card and said, we want to give you to help. And we had a letter that we were asking them to help us in praying for the city. Most of them agreed. And she said, and then this is our tool we want to give to them. We want to supply you with as many as you have. Some had 5 daycares, some had 1, some had them with 75, 100, 200, whatever, because we had all of them printed up already. So she said, they would say, oh, that's too many, we'll help you. She said, well, you can help us later on to print to some other schools. Well, in the meantime, I put an ad on the radio advertising for teachers, daycare owners, and managers. And that's how we got most of them. We had over 2,000 children praying in the city, and their prayer was for their school or their grandmom or their family or their schoolmate or whatever. We had over 2,000, and we got statistics from the police that crime had gone down in the city from just the youth, those babies praying. So that's when the Lord gave me the idea. I was 85 when he said, okay, that was good. So you can see that there's a need for that. I want you to do a coloring book. And I said, a coloring book? I don't know how to draw. He said, I want you to do 4 or 5 pages, maybe 2 or 3 pages of each one of the mountains. So we did. So each page we prayed over. When I would tell them to the graphic artist, she could visualize exactly what the Lord had told us, that the idea came from God. To have people of color, it's almost like a wellness. They get the same results from coloring that you would from drugs or from the medicines that they give you for. And of course, it was published. It's on Amazon and all the others. Psalm 71. Verses 17 and 18, and it says, O God, you have taught me from my youth, and to this day I declare your wondrous works. Now also, when I am old and gray-headed, O God, do not forsake me, until I declare your strength to this generation, your power to everyone who is to come. And that's the passage. My prayer coloring book is designed to show how to pray for the 7 centers seven centers of influence, which people call the seven mountains, and will help the children stay focused and intentional in their prayers, so they will know for whom they're praying. Our prayers move from being general to specific. This sets a pattern for a life of prayer, and at the same time build an army of praying people who seek Almighty God for direction for their lives as they watch and pray with thanksgiving and without ceasing. Our goal is to make sure all the children in the daycare centers in Philadelphia are ready for kindergarten and beyond. So we're still doing this book. I even got a home loan, and I got thousands of dollars and bought a lot of them in advance because they have 61 pages. In a way, some of the pages explain that God is the creator. He created nature. He created the trees and the flowers and the deer and all the other stuff, and why we would give thanks for it, and how, thank God for their life, because He's the one provided life, to pray for their family, the teachers, the police, the firemen, and all the armed forces. So we believe great things are coming out of Philadelphia. We're just waiting. I also have a vision of the Lord with me and Him at the top of the William Penn statue over City Hall, where He's facing the east, but He has in His hand His glory, and He said He would pour it out on Philadelphia. And I believe Him, that we're waiting for when He does it. But whether He does it in drips and drabs or all at once or in a big collage, tsunami, that's fine with me. I have been able to see the manifestation of many of the things that we prayed for. When He went to the mountaintop and He said, we as a people will make it to the promised land, I believe that. And I believe the Lord. So I'm thrilled that He has let me live this long, because many, many of the prayers that we prayed around Philadelphia and for the city, but for the country as well, that we've seen the manifestation of them. We've seen people. We've seen whole areas wiped clean, because we've been there and prayed over that area and continued to pray over it. He called me to Fifth and Market when my boss at work said, oh, you ought to go to City Hall. And I said, no. He said, across from the Liberty Bell. And I said, okay. And there were people. We've had all kinds of opposition. You name it. I've cried many tears. But it's the end of the journey when you get there and you look back at it and you think, what a privilege. What a privilege. Up from the dust of Alabama to an ambassador of the Lord Jesus Christ. And that's my life.